All right, good afternoon everybody, and thank you for being here. The presentation this afternoon is going to be about e-learning. Probably I should stand, otherwise you can see me. E-learning as it is organized by the Italian Army Language School. So the first thing I would like to tell you is that I work for a military institute, or if you want an institution, because it's the only one in Italy, that deals with training, the training of Italian soldiers, the linguistic training of Italian soldiers, not only in the army but also in the other armed forces, so also in the Navy and in the Air Force and in the Italian military police, the so-called Carabinieri. Today we are going to take a look at the e-learning platform we use at RSLE in order to, let's say, organize our e-learning courses at RSLE. And to start with, this is a summary of the points we are going to deal with, we are going to cover. As you can see here, the first talk, unfortunately the slides are in Italian, because I was told initially that the presentation was to be given in Italian and then we changed our plans. But anyway, I'll repeat exactly the contents of these slides. Who is the target audience, first of all, of the e-learning courses that we organize here at the slide, and what are the objectives of our courses, of our e-learning courses. Then we'll take a quick look at the most important technical characteristics of our platform, the types of courses that we organize, and the most important tools that the platform makes available. Finally, I'll give you a practical example of a listening comprehension exercise, or better, video listening comprehension exercise, in order to have a clear idea about what the students actually do with our platform. Before starting, do you have any questions? Is everything clear? Okay, good. Let's start. So these are the target audience, let's say, of our courses. The main audience is, of course, made of the personnel of the armed forces, but occasionally we also organize courses for the personnel of other ministries. It all depends on the agreements that we have signed with other ministries, with our institutions. And the objectives of our courses are many. These are the most important. We have two different types of courses. We have preparatory courses and maintenance courses. Now, what's the difference between the two? By preparatory course, we mean a course that is meant to let's say, prepare the student before he attends a traditional classroom course. So before coming here to Perugia, because the Italian Army Language School is located here in Perugia, they have to attend this preparatory course online. And after that, they come here, they attend the course in the presence, so in the presence of the teacher. And when they go back to their barracks, to their military bases, they have an opportunity to maintain the level that they have acquired by connecting to the platform and doing exercises on a regular basis. So this means that every 2 weeks, for example, they have to connect and take some listening and reading tests in order to see if they are still able to pass this kind of examination. I'll give you some more information later on. We started dealing with these courses in 1999, so we can say that the Italian Army Language School is a sort of pioneer in e-learning. And so you can easily imagine that we have already assisted and also evaluated, so examined thousands of students. Now, good afternoon everybody. Is it a problem if the presentation is in English? Can everybody understand the English here? Yes. More or less, okay. If you want, I can give you a brief summary in Italian, but you know, as you can see, the slides are in Italian, so if you can't follow English, you can take a look at the slides and I'm saying more or less the same things. Okay? Alright. So basically, to sum up, I was just introducing the e-learning platform that we use at the Italian Army Language School. I'm a teacher of the SLE. I don't know if you are from Perugia or not, but anyway, I work for the Italian Army Language School, Scuola Linguistica dell'Esercito, and we are talking about the e-learning platform that we use to, let's say, follow our students not in the presence but in the distance. So we organize online courses that are a sort of a replacement for the traditional classroom courses. Okay? All right. And we were taking a look at the difference between preparatory courses and maintenance courses. Before attending a course in the presence, they have to pass an exam online that is administered online. And after that, they come to Perugia and they attend a regular course, a traditional course. And after that, when they go back to their barracks, they have to follow, they have some follow-up activities that consist of, let's say, tests, reading and listening tests that they have to take online, okay? Right now we use an e-learning platform whose name is Elias, but we are migrating to Moodle. Now, I don't know if you have any experience with e-learning platforms or not, but anyway, these are probably, especially Moodle, is the most widespread e-learning platform in the world. Elias was created in Germany. It comes highly recommended. It's very reliable, but it's not as widespread as Moodle. And in fact, for this reason, we are migrating our contents to Moodle. Now, both platforms, so both Elias and Moodle, are SCORM compatible. So there is a compatibility with a particular digital format that is called SCORM. SCORM is an English acronym standing for, if I remember correctly, Shareable Content Object Reference Model. So what is it? Sorry?
It's correct.
Okay, it's correct, thank you. And this kind of format allows you to produce learning objects or even evaluation objects that can be transported and can be used on all platforms, on all e-learning platforms. So this means that if your school, for example, uses a certain kind of platform and then in the future they decide to migrate their contents to another one, thanks to this particular format, it's possible not to lose any material. So everything will be saved and transported to the other platform. Okay, can you follow? All right. Besides that, in Moodle and also in Elias, you have some proprietary tools that allow you to build up your learning units, your evaluation materials, without using learning objects. So this means that you have two possibilities. You can buy learning objects from, for example, third-party software houses, or you can create your own learning objects by using the tools that the platform makes available. And when you create these learning units or tests using the proprietary software that you find on the platform, then you can export this object using this format here, SCORM, and so you could even sell it if you want. Okay? So far we have organized the courses in these languages that you can see here on this list: English, French, Spanish, German, Portuguese and Arabic. So we have already prepared courses in all of these languages. Now there are two different types of courses. The first type is courses that provided the student with a sort of a tutoring service, and so this means that there is a tutor who actually follows the student during the course. The other type is non-assisted courses, in which there is no tutoring service, and in this case, of course, we can only manage the so-called receptive language skills, listening and reading, and there's nothing we can do about the speaking and writing, because there's no physical teacher following the students. Okay? What are the levels that we take into consideration? Well, all of the levels, from elementary to upper intermediate. We don't have, for the moment, courses in advanced English, because as you probably know, advanced English requires the attendance of a traditional course in the classroom. And so for this reason, we are making attempts, but so far advanced courses on our platform are not ready yet, okay? The courses, as I mentioned before, could be preparatory or maintenance. And when I say preparatory courses, I don't mean only courses based on elementary English. This is just one of the types of preparatory courses. In some cases, we may have to prepare specialized personnel. For example, very often we have to organize courses for staff officers or for the so-called this is a category of military personnel. This is forward air controllers. Who are they? The forward air controller is a soldier whose task is to communicate with the pilot when, for example, they are under enemy attack and they call for air support. And so the task of this soldier is to communicate with the pilot, and they will give him directions about, for example, the area to bombard, because they are under attack. And so we have, in these cases, to prepare these people linguistically before they attend a very technical course in a traditional classroom. Okay? Now let's take a quick look at the most important tools that we use on the platform. First of all, as you can easily imagine, each student has been provided with a username and a password. So he or she has his or her own credentials to have access to the platform. And what is important is that thanks to the SCORM format, whatever operation the student does is recorded in a log file in the platform, and this is extremely important. So this means that we know how many pages the student has visited, we know which exercises he has completed, and we know which tests he has passed or not passed. And for statistic purposes, this is precious information, simply because not only to evaluate the students, but also because, for example, if we realize that everybody makes a certain kind of mistake, this means that a certain question was not constructed correctly, and so we make amendments in these cases. All right. These are the tools that our platform makes available. When the student logs in, he will find, first of all, informative tools. What does it mean? Basically, he will be able to receive information about the duration of the course, the objectives of the course, so the syllabus, the program, if you want, of the course, okay? Then there is also a bulletin board that we use in order to post the most important messages. For example, if there is a forthcoming deadline, we use the bulletin board to inform the student about this deadline. Then we have the communication tools. And here there was a significant change very recently. In other words, what are communication tools? These are the tools that allow the student to get in contact with the teacher, with the tutor. And until a few years ago, the only tool that they could use was the telephone. They had to telephone us, and so this way we could follow them. Or they could use the email or the forum. But now things have changed, and we use a special software that is called Link. This is a sort of Skype, but it's much more powerful because, for example, besides communicating using audio-video material, Link also allows the student to co-browse with the teacher, so they can visit the same websites at the same time. Okay, there's a lot of things they can do together. Or there is the so-called...
For example, you can take control of the student's PC to support him how to do some actions.
That's right. This is another important possibility. Or, for example, think of the whiteboard, the virtual whiteboard that you can use. What is the whiteboard? Basically, it's a sort of, if you know Windows, you know the Paint software. So you can draw on a virtual, something like this. They can draw together on the same whiteboard, and in the presence of students at a very low level. Well, at that point, I think that having the possibility to correct the student is vital, because it's not as easy as writing using our own alphabet. And so this is one of the tools that Link makes available. Then let's take a look at the learning tools. What are they? The learning units. Now, the learning tools that the platform makes available is the real course. So in other words, what we do is create learning units that represent the course, the units that the student is supposed to study at regular intervals. And so, for example, every 2 weeks they are supposed to complete a unit. And so this means that every 2 weeks the teacher will ask them questions about the contents of the unit. This is how a course is organized. And what way do they communicate? By means of a link, or if the student doesn't have this tool, by means of the telephone. Then we have the evaluation tools. Basically, they consist of multiple choice questions. There are other possibilities, but multiple choice questions are the favorite one, simply because they are objective, and so they are impartial, let's say, and they are also easy to construct. This is a typical structure for an e-learning course. As you can see, the first thing, the first phase, consists of a placement test. So when the students arrive at the start attending this course, they have to undergo a placement test. And depending on the score that they get, they will be placed in a certain section. And then there will be a teacher, a tutor, for each section, depending on the level that they have achieved. As I told you before, every 2 weeks normally they have to study a unit, and they will be, let's say, tested on that particular unit. And obviously, at the end of the course, there will be a final exam. Now, the final exam typically is the only exam that is held not using the platform, but for obvious reasons in the presence, especially if we talk about a state competitive exam. Now, the course can be attended by means of the learning platform, but obviously, if the final result will make a difference between a student who continues with his career and a student who has to stop his career, for obvious reasons, the final exam must be held in a traditional way. Okay? All right. As far as assisted courses are concerned, so if you remember, by assisted courses we mean courses providing a tutoring service, and also non-assisted courses. In this case, we can insert the listening and the reading activities by means of the platform. And what are the typical exercises that we can construct using the tools that the platform makes available? Well, first of all, gap fill exercises. You know what a gap fill exercise is? So in other words, you have, for example, the script of a video recording. The student will have to listen to the recording, and while listening, he has to fill in some blanks, okay? So this is a typical gap fill exercise. Of course, this is a listening comprehension exercise. In the case of a reading exercise, it works in a similar way, but in this case, the blank to be filled in must be filled in by selecting a word from a list, okay? So nothing changes. The system is identical, but this time I don't have to listen to anybody, I have to select a word from a list. Then we have multiple choice questions, we know what they are, and another type is vocabulary matching exercises. A typical case is you have a word and a definition, so you have to match a particular word with its corresponding definition, okay? What about the speaking and writing? Well, as I told you, of course in this case we are talking about assisted courses with a tutoring service. Basically, every 2 weeks, besides, let's say, completing a listening or a reading test, they have to contact the tutor, and when they contact the tutor, they have to speak about the learning units they have studied. So, for example, the tutor will ask a question such as, would you remember about the article that you read last week? And so they discuss it, okay? This is one of the topics for the conversation. Or they can just correct the exercises together. They say, careful here, you made a silly mistake because the grammatical rule doesn't say that, something like this. Of course, they can use the telephone or also link or Skype. As far as the writing is concerned, normally we give them informal text, formal text, or essays. These are the 3 types of writing exercises that we usually administer to our students, okay? All right. Evaluation tools, well, these are, after all, exercises as well. So we have, for listening and reading, for the moment, they are only based on a multiple choice question. So this is the only type of test that we administer as far as the receptive skills are concerned. So we give them quizzes dealing with, for example, the topics that they studied in the learning units or grammatical topics, and they will have to answer questions about them. As far as the speaking is concerned, the speaking test is composed of 2 different phases. Now, the first deals with a personal introduction. So the first question that we ask our examinees is always the same. Can you please introduce yourself? Can you tell me something about your personal life, your job, and so on and so forth? And after that, depending on the performance of the student during the first part, during the personal introduction, we give them either a role play for intermediate levels or a card with a description of a conversation topic. A conversation topic dealing with geopolitics, sociology, and all these things, okay? Depending on the level, depending on the performance of the student during the first phase of the speaking test. Writing is composed of three different compositions. We have an informal letter, an email, or a postcard. This is for the lowest level, for the elementary level. Then, for the second level, for the intermediate one, we give either a formal letter, a short essay, or a military report. Don't forget that our students are soldiers, so that's why you can see here a military report. And finally, for the third and the fourth level, that is the more or less upper intermediate, in some cases even advanced level, we give a long essay about the geopolitical subjects. Okay? All right. This is a typical example of the three tasks that a student may be given for the writing test. We'll read them together. Task 1, elementary level. Write a thank you note. So here the subject is a thank you note to a relative or family friend who has just sent you a special gift. Show your appreciation and explain what you enjoy about the gift. This is an elementary task, okay? Task 2. Write a letter to a hotel manager to complain about the terrible service you received during your stay. Say how the facilities you actually found at the hotel did not correspond to the problem of an aging population. Increased life expectancy combined with the declining birth rates have caused many to worry about the cost of an aging population. How can the world protect itself from this demographic time bomb? Okay? So here you can see a practical example of a writing card that is given to our students when they have to sit for a writing test. Do you think it's difficult? No? Okay. And this is an example for the speaking test. And so we have an example of the role play and another example for the conversation topic. Role plays are usually given for level 2 students, so intermediate students, whereas the conversation topics are given to, let's say, stronger students, okay? Linguistic, of course. Role play. You are a manager, you have an employee that hasn't been performing well. He or she is often late. He or she also spends a lot of time checking his or her private emails and strange websites instead of doing work. Yesterday, you caught him or her sleeping at his or her desk. Please fire the employee, possibly in a nice way. Okay? It's a role play. And of course, the examiner will play the role of the employer, of the employee, while the student is the employer. A conversation topic about a geopolitical subject, subject dealing with the sociology or other things. Why are social networks so popular nowadays? What do you think are the positive and the negative effects? So in this case, we are discussing, for example, social networks such as Facebook or the like. What is the final target of our e-learning courses? The final target is to create exactly the same condition as courses that are given, that are held in a traditional classroom. In other words, and so they have to guarantee the same effectiveness, of course. So you are successful when you organize something like that if during the course and also when taking the final exam, the student does not perceive the distance. Okay, there should be no difference between a course held in the presence and a course held in the distance. Okay, so this is the final target. Okay, now that's it. I would like to show you a practical example of a learning unit, and that's it. Okay. So far, do you have any questions? Also in Italian, if you want, in Italiano. No questions? Okay. Okay, now we'll take a look at an example of an intermediate learning unit. Now this is the grammatical part of an intermediate course. We'll take a look at a unit dealing with number and gender of indefinite pronouns. What is it about? You know that in English we have a problem with indefinite pronouns such as everyone, everybody. What kind of possessive adjective should we use in combination with everyone or everybody? His or her or their. And so there are different lines of thinking about the answer to this question. Let's see what Merriam-Webster says about it. What do we do practically when we organize an exercise, a learning unit like this? We can build up our own learning materials, but very often we borrow this material from, for example, YouTube, other sources, and of course we are talking about freeware sources, and then we create exercises combined with this material. What is the structure, the typical structure of a learning unit? As you can see, this is a basic learning unit of intermediate level. The first task is made of a vocabulary exercise, so it's a matching exercise in which we have to match a word with its corresponding definition. Then we have a gap fill activity, so we have to listen to a video, a recording, and fill in the blanks, as I told you before. Now, one thing that is important to notice is that the words that we used in the first task will be found also in the second task, okay? And then there is a final exam, if you want, so a series of multiple choice questions dealing with the content of what the speaker said in the video. Let's take a quick look. For example, here we have 10 definitions, and here, as you can see, on the right side, we have a list of words. I'll read them to you, and then we can do it together if you want. The words are balanced, grammarian, luck, to favor, to imply, to make a good sense, to share, to strike, troublesome, update. Do you know all of these words? More or less?
Yes.
Not all of them. Okay, you know all of these words. Now, let's take a look at the first definition here.
But if you can zoom the...
I don't know how to do that, unfortunately, because I'm not a Mac user and I was given a Mac. That's the problem. And so I feel mutilated, believe me, so I really don't know what to do. Anyway, I'll read it for you, okay? So the first definition is to indicate or suggest without being explicitly stated, referring to words to signify or mean. So it's a verb, of course. Now here we have a list of verbs. To favor, I don't think it is. What about to imply?
To imply.
That's right. Do you agree? What are you implying, okay? What are you suggesting? They are more or less the same. So in this case, the correct answer is to imply. Let's do some more. Laborious, causing annoyance or difficulty. What about troublesome? Would make sense. And so on and so forth. Let's do another and then we'll stop. To divide and distribute in parts.
To share.
To share, that's right. So we have some very good students here. Another one at this point. To be perfectly reasonable or comprehensible. This is an idiomatic expression. Again, to be perfectly reasonable or comprehensible. What's the idiom you would use from this list?
Balanced. No.
Or
no.
to make good sense. What you're saying it makes a lot of sense, makes good sense. So probably here, this fits the, no, this one here. Yeah, this suits the answer better. To enter the mind of, occur, to impress. Well, this is quite difficult. In this case, the correct answer is to strike. Think of the expressions such as, well, $20, you know, it strikes me as too cheap. Or, well, what you're saying strikes me as a long shot. So what does it mean? Well, I think that this is an assumption. It's not going to happen actually, okay? And so on and so forth. Now, as you can see here, at the bottom of this page, you have this button here, check. If I click on check, I've not completed the exercise. There are some other gaps. We have, your score is 50%. Some of your answers are incorrect. Incorrect answers have been left in place for you to change, okay? Now, don't forget that this exercise was completed on the platform, and so whatever I did was recorded, was stored in a log file. And this will allow the teacher to know exactly how many answers were given by the student, how many mistakes he made, how many correct answers he gave. Okay? This was the first task. Let's take a look at the second task now. Get feel activity. Let's listen to this brief lesson about the use of indefinite pronouns in English. This is taken from Merriam-Webster.com.
Welcome to Ask the Editor. I'm Emily Brewster, an associate editor at Merriam-Webster. Facebook recently changed updates like Noah Webster commented on their own photo to the more natural sounding Noah Webster commented on his own photo, which makes good sense because Facebook knows the gender of its users. But what about using the traditionally plural their to refer to a single person? Is saying one of your friends commented on their own photo really so bad? For a long time, the answer to that question was clearly no. Observe the following from the 1611 King James Version of the Bible. One reason for favoring the plural pronoun is that indefinite pronouns like everyone usually imply a plural, even if they're grammatically singular. Another is the lack of gender identification that indefinite pronouns and words like friend share with they, their, and them. But most of us were taught to avoid they in such cases and to use he instead. This is thanks to a group of 18th century grammarians who decided that indefinite pronouns like everyone are always grammatically singular and that masculine singular pronouns should be used for reference to them. The same went for non-gender specific singular nouns like friend. To them, inaccuracy of gender was less troublesome than inaccuracy of number, and so we got everyone should do his best. Today, we're more likely to use the gender balanced his or her, everyone should do his or her best. That's fine until we end up with things like, everyone should do his or her best in whatever situations he or she finds himself or herself in. Of course, there's always, you should do your best, or people should do their best. But all this effort to avoid a usage that's centuries old strikes some of us as strange. Perhaps everyone should just do their best in the situations they find themselves in, even if their best involves they as a singular pronoun. For more from our Ask the Editor series, visit Merriam-Webster.com.
Alright, so now, as you can see, there is a timer here. You have 10 minutes available at your disposal, and so this means that you have plenty of time. And at this point, as you can see here, you have all the buttons available, so you can stop the recording whenever you want in order to have enough time to fill in the blanks. And so, for example, let's fill in just a couple of blanks here.
Welcome to Ask the Editor. I'm Emily Brewster, an associate editor at Merriam-Webster. Facebook recently changed updates like Noah Webster commented on.
So, Facebook recently changed the updates. Very good. Congratulations. You're a very good student.
And the second one is which made good sense.
Their own photo to the more natural sounding Noah Webster commented on his own photo, which makes good sense because
So, which makes a good sense? Are you a language student? No? You're
It's my brother.
Okay.
He's.
Okay, and so on and so forth. Okay. Now let's check. So your score is 20%, and as you can see here, both updates and makes a good sense were correct. Okay. Now this is the first task, and finally we have the let's call it the final test based on multiple choice questions. Again, you can listen to the recording, and this time while listening, you can answer this set of multiple choice questions. You can also see these questions all together on a list this way. For example, let's take a look at question number 1. Facebook is now able to use the plural there to refer to a man or a woman. Well, this is theory. Use his or her according to the gender of its users. This is possible because this is exactly what the speaker said. So in other words, now Facebook, depending on the registration of the student, knows your sex. And so if Facebook knows that you are a man, whenever they refer to you, they will use his, not for example, it's or his or her, okay? But his. And that's it. Well done, your answer is correct, and so on and so forth. The last thing I'm going to show you, but just a minute, just to show you how it is organized, is another type of exercise that is based on something completely different. Now, the exercise I showed you before dealt with grammar, of course. This, on the contrary, deals with communication. On the same course, you will find the two different types of lessons. The ones that we have just seen, so grammatical lessons, and then also lessons based on communicative context. For example, this is a lesson dealing with the English used in science, and in particular the topic that is dealt with in this lesson is scientific research into longevity and even immortality. And you know, the organization is very similar. You have a pre-reading task which is based on some pictures and short articles about this topic. This is a way of introducing the topic. For example, I didn't know that there is a type of jellyfish that is immortal. I didn't know that we have, so in this world there are immortal animals, so animals that never die. And you know, this article tells you that there is this type of jellyfish that never dies, okay, unless somebody kills it, okay. And after this, you have a similar structure as the previous exercise. You have a vocabulary matching exercise, and again you have to match the word with the corresponding definitions. And also in this case, all of these words are also used in the articles that we should read. And the article this time is about immortality, and it's a combination of three articles. So the first is about lobsters, and the lobsters apparently can live forever. So we should try to discover their secret at this point. And then there is another one about some Russian research that offers immortality to billionaires. And finally, there is a third article. It's about Google bosses that decided to allocate money for this astonishing quest for eternal life. And again, the student is supposed to read this article and complete the script by using a synonym for the word that you can find in bold letters on the right side. For example, here we have unknown, unrevealed, and so this should be undisclosed, and so on and so forth. So we have the check button at the bottom of the page that will give us the score in real time. And our score is obviously recorded, and the teacher will know exactly how many mistakes we made and how many correct answers we gave. Now, there are a lot of things I should tell you about. Unfortunately, the time at my disposal is over. They tell me to stop. And so, I don't know if you have any questions about what has been said. Was I clear or unclear? Could you follow what I said? Again, questions are welcome also in Italian. Domande anche in italiano, va bene? Ok, è tutto chiaro? Quindi la piattaforma di e-learning utilizzata dalla SLE diciamo, è indirizzata soprattutto al personale militare, però attenzione, molto spesso organizziamo corsi, come ho detto, anche per i civili, quindi per gli enti di altri ministeri, anche non so, per università, per scuole. Quindi tutto sta ad avviare un contatto con il nostro istituto. Va bene? Grazie per l'attenzione. Spero di vedervi presto. In bocca al lupo per il futuro.